Hello, people. I'm Lost Child 14,000, or Abe, or Alex, or whatever. I cannot believe this. What the hell is Blaze thinking? His last three games, while not actually based off the same code, certainly have a lot in common with an Impa Fiend in terms of basic design and mechanical construction. Yes, admittedly all code and art was done fresh for each one, despite having very similar scope, scale, environments, and death traps. Each time it was done as a deliberate step, building in mechanics that Blaze Epic definitely felt worked into his future games, even though it still managed to also feel like a copy and paste job. Although I'm inclined to believe that he was attempting to be fresh all the more because the last game's writing and design was also very disjointed. No, disjointed seems too flexible a word for nil ninjotic Ronin. How about Frankenstein? But this is insane. Now he's trying to revamp another game style from a bad game. The game I made so much of a fuss about that Blaze actively went out of his way to fix my gripes a little when I claimed it was unplayable. Blaze, it's hard enough to race a horse that was half dead on arrival, but a solution would be a means of curing the horse of its affliction, not kicking the horse down the track. Bear in mind, the way the Pixelated Fist was a finely crafted parkour platformer with barely any story, a world that felt like a half-assed Hey Arnold, a samey-sounding emotive jazz soundtrack, and absolutely horrible combat that broke the entire experience. So what does this incredibly similar-looking parkour game have to gift His Majesty's court, so that thou art not flogged and thrown in our dungeon like the last subject who held the crest of parkour playground? Let me guess. You're severely lacking in narrative whatsoever. Actually, it not only has a narrative, but a fairly strong focus in narrative, and some basic character development. So you must be lacking in your style and aesthetic presence. Well, actually, it has a more developed style of pixel cartoon. Still stuck in the 8-bit era, but it's a fusion of the blocky anime feel of Exotic, Neurotic, and Psychotic trilogy, and the Hey Arnold feel of Jump Boxer. Yes, a new twist that's still in danger of going stale, ironically. Speaking of new age going stale, what is that soundtrack? Ah, I see. You're still using your family's old bard. Hey, Loot Sack! Take it from me. Learn a few new styles of music, and make the tempo go faster when the action actually starts to go faster. Or you can make a tense part of your hero's journey seem unimportant. You know, whatever. How about the meat of your performance? Let me guess. I can look forward to some skillfully designed platform segments overlap with some of the cheapest excuses for combat I've ever... Combat is actually pretty good. I mean, whip my ass, no cheap enemies, no cheap traps, in a world that can be both seen and experienced. It's kind of a surprise, really. Blaze, you've pretty much cured the horse. This is a pleasant experience all around. Not much in the way of evolution or game mechanic experimentation, but nonetheless a massive step in the right direction. Hikikomori No Chuunibyou roughly translates out to reclusiveness of the entitled/delusional 14-year-old. So obviously the game is about a rambling freerunner, martial artist, manga author prodigy. Write what you know, eh, Blaze? Allusions to delusions of grandeur aside, reclusiveness might also mean mystery in Japanese, the same way the word for storm cloud might be a metaphorical shorthand for dark or shady. But if that's the case, why not go with Shimpi, or Nazo? Something that actually means mystery of the power-mad 14-year-old and not delusions of a shut-in. Oh. Well, while it's true that the main character is a manga artist, prodigy, freerunner, bodyguard, in consistent danger, the game's title, and literally nothing else, begs the question of how much of this is actually real. So the story for this one, you're 14, a famous artist, a prodigy martial artist, and you are high. Yeah, seriously though. In this one, Raichi, the author's self-insert character, does the auteur artist thing and gives his own version of by the power of Grayskull right before he runs off for an appointment or opts to take a side quest. Seriously, he must be deluded. He goes on like this for a while, sometimes going into a huge goth anime Shakespearean sonnet whenever he meets new people. But much of the time they're talking to him and giving third-person perspective on the events taking place. And though the main character is obviously delusional or perhaps just full of himself, nearly all the third-party NPCs give a large bearing on the story in the game's events. The cosmic horrors don't really show up until the end, and even then, the AI is programmed in such a way that everything looks more deliberate. So I personally choose to believe the ghosts and zombies near the end are actually magicians with flamethrowers and homeless people respectively. You've done this too many times now, Blaze. It was cool when it was actually aliens or ghosts or hallucinations, but even if it's the fantasy and reality coming together in his mind, it still doesn't fit. You already made him talking crazy and believing that he has the power of darkness. Why do the wide variance of NPC fight mechanics get replaced with this BS near the end? Better yet, if he is really out of his mind, why doesn't the whole world shift into Dracula's castle and back just to show us how nuts or tripping balls he really is? I would actually like it if the bulk of the game really is a story of how Raichi got his groove back, but given that we are some reclusive shut-in, all this could be a daydream. Too bad the game plays it straight for most of the way through, only introducing the fancy elements in the last 2 levels. So, Raichi Mick has no surname, must be living in the prime of his gothy hipster life, as he writes manga, pimps in, gets to be the hero despite sucking at his job as a security guard, and runs off with a pop star after basically being Spider-Man for a few weeks. My wording may be a bit sardonic, but really it's a, you guessed it, tale about a freerunner kid in postmodern Japan who gets roped into dealing with the mob, and gets stalked by entities of cosmic horror, sort of, but like I said, it's actually good. Again, the story actually follows a 3-act structure with few plot holes, considering, and not only does it make sense, it also doesn't destroy the canon of a far more deserving game. Title it after Ronin, and he's literally boss number 3, my god, please. Its story is actually most like that of old-school action tropes with a rival and a love interest slash damsel in distress slash royalty and a mentor and a major villain. But while it is a rigid story structure, it still is a giant leap in the right direction compared to Nil Ninjatic Ronin. The gameplay mechanics are similar to that of Way of the Pixelated Fist. While animation is less fluid, the really stupid press up or down to block randomly generated slash unpredictable attacks bullshit is gone. Fighting actually feels more like a skirmish with single button attack patterns and limited combos, which is good. I especially like that when enemies get knocked back, they can ram into the person behind them for a free hit. One thing I would definitely add would be the implementation of a roll or flip technique to put yourself on the other side of an enemy. Unless I knock an enemy down, I'm just stuck trying not to get pinned to a wall, or a crowd, or even worse, a boss. Yeah, I can see why you have the boss teleport to the opposite side of the arena with every skirmish, and so can everyone else. The environments still look a lot like Ninjatic a bit, a little bit flat, and the world does have a lot more depth than a matte painting this time. More attention is given over to the details, so city areas have more population density and storefronts, rather than death traps and psychos with shurikens. And the soundtrack? Look, smooth jazz in the rain and softcore slash new age synth slash house is great, but for some reason it's really grating here, in the later levels, and all the tracks seem to merge together after a while. Not to mention, as the game gets more and more intense, the music starts to lull me to sleep, and it just tenses my mind to the point where I actually had to start listening to classic rock just to be able to focus. If that makes any sense. You clearly put a major amount of work into this soundtrack, but if you want to play the line between subtle and tense, look at the music of a stealth game, detective movies, or Metal Gear Solid. Here's a pro tip. If you really want to screw with the player, have them walk into an empty room or area and kill everything but the ambient noises, and then follow it up with some kind of payoff, like a key or mini-boss or encounter, story point, etc., etc. Put some unique spins on this basic storytelling mechanic and you'll have the perfect mid-game cliffhanger moment of some kind. Also, the main character, and all of them for that matter, actually own some kind of personality. Some characters are all harsh and stern, and some of them never really left Woodstock, but that's all fine, and sometimes it's wholly enjoyable. Really, I just take umbrage with three things. You know, I'm starting to see a pattern with Blaze's good but not quite great games having three major details out of place. 1. Gameplay doesn't inform your story. Out on the street trying to make a martial arts name for yourself? Hey, let's have a street gang fight the main character the entire way there instead of steadily getting worse or getting more scarce with every poster we put up that advertises not Blaze as a bad dude. An imposter is hounding you? Well, let's bring him up out of context among other anime references and drug-addled ramblings instead of running into him stealing from you and then selling your work. And while we're touching on story, Blaze, you should really check this script over. The writing is very forced, your sentences are very disjointed. I mean, the character will often go out of his way to make things more epic than it really is, but when he runs into his love interest for the first time, the dialogue seems like it was written by a drunk who just read Midsummer Night's Dream. 2. The music, for some reason, doesn't go with the more tense moments. And 3. This isn't a new gameplay style. But I suppose I'll make less of a fuss the further away we get away from the Nil Ninjatic thing. The screens don't scroll to my knowledge, and combat and free-running elements are back in full swing. Sure, the pole-standing mechanic is a breath of fresh air, and it isn't the same wall-jumping with a tiny character pixel nightmare as the last three, but the whole game still seems really flat. I just can't put my finger on it. Still, take my advice. Once you've mastered this style of game to a certain degree, do experiment with other game mechanics. Branch out, do something more Zelda-ish again, or something more Metroidvania, or even try to do something like Hyper Light Drifter. Get out of your usual comfort zones. Focus on making a heartfelt story and also balance out an RPG, or just experiment with something else entirely. Make something that scrolls. Anything! I did, however, enjoy this game, and I choose to see it as both a fresh step and a massive apology for releasing the Way of the Pixelated Fist in a broken, unforgiving state. It's good again, Blaze. Just a few minor tweaks and you could really have something, but it's all actually starting to feel flat for me. I marveled at Samurai_Jazz, and all that was a Zelda dungeon stretched out to a full game all to itself, very broadly speaking, and I liked the sequel for the way that you built upon the world and let us get stuck in it. But the sense of immersion has dimmed to less and less with most of your games, up until this point. Until the last one, Let's Piss on Ronin, was the point of matte painting full effect. But, like I said, this is so much better. If you want to move on and get better, design something from scratch, and make sure that it's a somewhat enjoyable experience from start to finish. That's from the start of your design phase to the finish of your gold state. Put any one of my suggestions into play or just make another Castlevania Light scenario. But if you want to revisit your classics and focus on the past, then let me suggest a script for your next project. Just click here.
Said, why you always running in place?